Good morning, Sundaram. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Jansi. Nice to see you after a reasonably long time.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good
Welcome, sir.
afternoon. Good afternoon.
Madam is busy. Nice seeing you, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Director,
Good
sir.
afternoon. Good afternoon. So, good
Sir.
to join.
For another, maybe another.
Yeah, we'll take another 5 minutes. Let others join. And just let me know.
Yes.
Jansi, good afternoon. Are you able to hear?
చెప్పండి నేను మీద అక్కడ సెట్ చేస్తాను చూడండి షేర్ చేసేస్తున్నాను గుడ్ ఆఫ్టర్నూన్ సార్
Good afternoon.
హౌ ఆర్ యూ సార్ ఐఎమ్ గుడ్ సార్ హౌ ఆర్ యూ
Good. Long time.
ఎస్ సార్ లాంగ్ టైం
Bagunara?
బాగున్నాను సార్ మీరు
Nice. Very nice.
సో యు ఆర్ మిస్సింగ్ తెలుగు సార్
I am, in a way, yes. But I am also in touch with so many,
IAHR only
Yeah, quite a good number of them are there.
Yeah.
I speak. How is your daughter?
She's good, sir. She's studying in 7th standard.
Good. Very nice. Very nice.
Sir, what are you doing, sir?
Well, what am I doing? Busy
No,
with
no.
some RAC, that.
I'll change, sir. How is your daughter?
My daughter was in Hong Kong just a few days back. She came.
Yeah.
Son and daughter-in-law are here. All are doing well.
Yeah. Your daughter-in-law son fine, sir.
Yeah. All are fine. All are fine.
Good, sir.
Prasad Babu Garu, namaskar.
నాకు సెట్ చేస్తాను.
Good afternoon.
Sir, namaste, sir.
Namaste. Namaste to all of you. Namaste. So, it's a different than my usual. Jansi, what is your focus now?
I'm about to retire, sir. No
You are
more
about to
focus.
retire.
Yes, sir.
My goodness.
Sir. Next year, February, I'm going to retire, sir.
And then what will you do?
I'll take care of my daughter, sir.
That you are already doing.
Not well, sir. She has a lot of complaints.
Arun, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆಯೇನಪ್ಪ? Professor TVK Singh garu, namaskar. Bagnara Guru garu. So nice to see you back again. Sometime, these are the occasions when we can meet. So nice. You are muted.
సార్ మీ వెబినార్ ఉంది కదా సార్, మిస్ చేయలేం కదా.
ఏమో సార్, మీరు పెద్దవాళ్ళు ఉంటే నేను వస్తాను సార్. Because all of you are there participating and giving encouragement, I am coming. I have retired about 3 years back, I guess.
Yes.
But still busy with some RAC, this, that, meetings. So
సార్ 35 మంది ఉన్నారు, 35 people.
Okay, I think they will join. Kollam Sridevi garu vachunara 36. Oh,
Sir, namaste, sir.
namaskar mandi. Where is your daughter? Who is your daughter?
Sir, she's Sri Chandana, sir. Must be in IIRR. She has joined, sir, as JRF. I had to.
She's with me, sir, in our
With you.
department.
Ade.
Sridevi, బాగున్నావా?
బాగున్నాను మేడం, మీరు బాగున్నారా?
Good.
Arun, how many more years for you?
Sir, 2 years, sir.
2 years. Good.
Chitra ma'am, good afternoon.
Chitra Shankar, oh.
Ah,
நல்லா இருக்கியம்மா, ரொம்ப நாளாச்சு பார்த்து. மியூட்ல இருக்க.
Sir, you are a master of English.
Good afternoon, sir. ரொம்ப நாள் ஆச்சு பார்த்து. How are you, sir?
Some languages here and there.
Yes, sir. You are a master of at least 4 South Indian languages, I suppose, sir.
కొంచెం వస్తుందండి ఏమో.
Sir,
The thing is,
Yes,
when
sir.
I speak one language, the persons from other language don't know whether it is correct or not. So I am able to get
No,
along.
and I can guarantee that you spoke one of the best sentences in Tamil, sir.
Sir, Tamil தான் சார், தமிழ் தான்.
No, he is Kannadiga, Chitra. Sir is Kannadiga and he speaks Kannada better than other languages.
నేను
I think
తెలుగులో మాట్లాడితే అందరూ మనవాళ్ళండి.
లేదండి.
எல்லா மொழியும் ஒண்ணுதான். I was a
good
chameleon
afternoon. Yes.
heading the Kannada Kriya Samiti in IAHR. And IAHR, because of so many Telugus, it became Telugu Desam. So,
Good afternoon, TVK Singh, sir.
How are you?
Fine,
Nice,
sir.
nice to see you.
Yes, sir. Nice to see you too, sir.
Namaste, Namaste, Singh Saab. Namaste.
Namaste, Sundaram sir. Namaste.
I think there was some problem in the earlier link. I think people will join soon. Shall we start the talk, ma'am?
Yeah, please. Good afternoon, Sundaram Garu.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. Padma madam, I think we can start the proceedings.
Yes,
Soon others
sir.
will join.
So, respected director, dignitaries, distinguished scientists, my teachers, fellow colleagues, members of SAR, Association of Rice Research Worker members, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you all. On behalf of IIRR and Society for Advancement of Rice Research, I extend a warm welcome to you all for this webinar, which is 17th in the series and is being organized under the aegis of Azad ki Amrut Mahotsava. Now I also welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. NK Krishna Kumar, former DDG, ICAR, for this webinar. Now I invite our director, Dr. R.M. Sundaram, to give his introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We all know that our agricultural ecosystems provide humans with food, forage, bioenergy, and also some important pharmaceutical chemicals. And maintaining a healthy agricultural ecosystem is essential to human well-being. These systems rely on ecosystem services provided by natural ecosystems, including pollination, biological pest control, maintenance of soil structure and fertility, in addition to nutrient cycling and then hydrological services. Preliminary assessments indicate that the value of these ecosystems services to agriculture is enormous and often underappreciated. Agroecosystems also produce a variety of ecosystem services such as regulation of soil and water quality, carbon sequestration, support for biodiversity, and cultural services. Depending on management practices, agriculture can also be the source of numerous disservices, including loss of wildlife habitat, nutrient runoff, sedimentation of waterways, to name a few. But the trade-offs that may occur between provisioning services and other ecosystem services and disservices should be evaluated of spatial scale, temporal scale, reversibility, and also based on our priorities related to food and nutritional security. To counteract the negative effects of intensive agriculture, there is an increasing interest in approaches that reconcile agricultural production with the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and associated ecosystem services. Integration of functional agrobiodiversity in agricultural systems holds promise to meet these challenging objectives, but this requires the generation, transfer, and implementation of tailor-made knowledge and policy development towards this particular direction. Currently, various initiatives are undertaken across several European nations to develop and assess the potential of biodiversity-based management practices by farmers, industry, researchers, and governmental and non-governmental organizations. Krishna Kumar sir, I'm happy to note that for the past almost a decade, we are committed groups who are working on agroecological management of rice pests, particularly ecological engineering. Dr. Chitra is working on that, and similarly, Dr. Jhansi has made, Dr. Jhansi Rani has made some similar seminal contribution in this regard by utilizing some of the botanicals. So, sir, in this regard, we have amongst us an eminent entomologist who is also beloved former Deputy Director General Horticulture, Dr. NK Krishna Kumar, who has got a very wide international exposure and is also an authority in the field of ecosystem services and then agrobiodiversity. He'll be delivering a talk today on agrobiodiversity ecosystem services for sustainable agriculture. And sir, I'm happy to say that we had a recent introductory talk by our Honorable Director General, Dr. Himanshu Pathak. He stressed this particular fact, which you'll be emphasizing in your talk, that we should move from farming systems based approach to food systems based approach or environmental system based approach, because that's the only way wherein we can sustain our agricultural production and then meet our food and nutritional security targets. Sir, I now heartily invite you to start your talk. But before we start this particular talk, sir, I request Dr. Jansi to give an introduction of the speaker. Oh, sir, madam.
Yes, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Today's speaker, Dr. NK Krishna Kumar, former DDG, Horticulture Sciences, ICAR, New Delhi, Director IIRR, Dr. RM Sundaram, scientist from IIRR and also from other institutions, ladies and gentlemen. Very good afternoon to all of you. When I was asked by our director to introduce the speaker, I felt very privileged, honored, and glad to speak about my favorite sir, Guru, under whom I worked at IIHR, got guidance and support for which I am always grateful to you, sir. And now I'm going to about to give your biodata, sir. Dr. NK Krishna Kumar was born on 5th September 1955 at Mysore, Karnataka State. He did his graduation and post-graduation from University of Agriculture Sciences, Bangalore. He was awarded PhD from Hawaii, USA in 1993, and as an East-West scholar and PDF from US Davis, California in 2002 to 2003. In 38 years of his illustrious career in ICAR, he served as a Deputy Director General Horticulture, Director in NBAII, Bangalore for 2 years, and Head of Entomology and Nematology for 8 years at IIHR. He has made valuable contributions in the field of agriculture, horticulture, research management, biodiversity to India and also Asian region. Dr. Krishna Kumar also contributed significantly to IPM vegetables, location of source of resistance, management of sucking pest as a vector of plant pathogens. As a part of PhD under guidance of Dr. Daily Ullman, Dr. Kumar contributed to better understanding and management of vector thrips of tomato spotted wilt virus. He continued this work for his postdoctoral fellowship also on tomato spotted wilt virus glycoprotein. Dr. Krishna Kumar is a recognized advisor for postgraduate studies at many universities. He also organized several scientific meetings such as National Meeting on Entomology and IPM, sap-sucking insect pests, focused meetings on leafhoppers, whiteflies, mealybugs, insecticide resistance management, and bioinformatics. The ORP sucking pest project, which contributed invaluably to HRD into the national systems, besides more than 60 international publications have come from this. Under his leadership, the team developed DNA barcoding for 50 different species of insect pests of different orders, designed species-specific markers for major insect pests of horticulture crops. As a recognition of his scientific and managerial abilities, Dr. Krishna Kumar, an entomologist, was selected as a DDG Horticulture ICAR in 2012. During his tenure, the IIHR got sanctioned for PG School for Horticulture, and also Directorate of Floriculture in Pune was established. Besides conduct of several scientific meetings under his tenure, horticulture surpassed grain production is an understatement during his tenure. Dr. Krishna Kumar worked as a Biodiversity International from 2016 to 20 with a responsibility to lead research in South and Central Asia and played a key role in organizing international meetings. At Biodiversity International, he initiated research on development of ABD index and valuation of ecosystem services in collaboration with ICAR. He is associated with many national and international professional societies in various capacities. He is the Vice President of Entomology Society of India. He is a recipient of several awards and also honors. Primarily, he is the Honorary Fellow of Karnataka State Science and Technology, recipient of Namanal Award for Conservation of Biodiversity, Dr. Vasantaraj David Award for work in entomology, Dr. Rai Chaudhary Memorial Award for Phytopathological Society of India, and these are some of them to name. He is the Research Advisory Committee for Central Silk Board, Chairman RAC, Indian Institute of Spice Research, Calicut, Central Sugar Crop Research Institute, Thiruvananthapuram, Directorate of Cashew Research, Puttur. Dr. Krishna Kumar has several national and international research publications, more than 110 research publications to his credit. Besides, he has several books written, 5 books, chapters. Dr. Krishna Kumar has entitled book on advances in IPM for horticulture crops and an ICAR publication, The Onion. With this brief introduction, now I request Dr. NK Krishna Kumar sir to deliver his talk. May Dr. Krishna Kumar sir, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jansi, Dr. Sundaram, Dr. Padma Kumari, Dr. TVK Singh, and so many other dignitaries who are here. Am I audible?
Yes.
Can I share my slides?
Yes, sir.
Share the screen. Okay. Okay. Okay, today a very brief talk on biodiversity, ecosystem services for sustainable agriculture.
Sir, sorry for the interruption, sir. Your screen has not been shared, sir.
My screen is not shared. It's visible here. Sharing is paused. It says paused. Should I say stop share?
Yeah, you can try to share it once again, sir.
No, once again. Share screen. 1 minute. Let me see. It says stop share. I don't know. Is paused. Resume slideshow. Let's see. Is it okay?
No, sir. No, sir. It's not coming.
Just 1 second. Let's see. Okay, just hold on. Okay, hold on. Let me see what I can do. What do I do from here?
Shall I share it, sir?
Yeah, please share.
Okay, sir. I'll just share it. I cannot share when you are sharing, sir.
I have said stop share.
Okay, I'll just wait for a moment. It is shared in my screen.
Rice 1.
Rice 1. Is easy. Stop sharing. Okay. 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 Share. Okay. Full screen. No.
It's now visible, ma'am.
Now visible?
Oh.
Yeah. Sir, are you able to see the slide, sir?
Yeah, I am able to see the slide. When I say next, you please this thing. Okay. Go to just operate the slides at your end.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
So today we just 45 minutes, we will just understand a little bit about biodiversity, ecosystem services, and sustainable agriculture. All of you are aware that the United UN Millennium Goal is the sustainable development, a buzzword, but slowly becoming more clearer as we go through the years roll by. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Next slide. Next slide.
Yes.
See, let us start with a statement by Brooks White, who said that I feel more optimistic about a bright future for man if he spends less time proving that he can outwit nature and more time tasting her sweetness and respecting her seniority. More or less, it echoes the words of the Director General, who said that who should try to understand and have our agriculture and all other ways of life with nature very much inbuilt, and taking care, enjoying the benefits of nature without spoiling the nature. Next slide. I will not just talk about India, but I'll talk about South Asia in general, because I feel that a time has come, the first time has come for us to not look from the narrow perspective of our own country, but we have to see the region as a whole if we have to understand the nature, climate change, and many other aspects. After all, it's a globalized world. This particular region, which harbors more than 1/5 of the world's population, heavily dense, you can see that the 24% of the world's population with just 3% of the land surface. But what is most important is the poverty is concentrated here more than any other part of the world. And what is astonishingly true is the poverty that is there, 25%, 75% of it is in the rural areas. Now you can understand the linkage between the farming, the rural poverty, and in spite of all the noise that we make, we are one of the highly malnourished countries in the world. At the time of independence, our per capita consumption of protein has actually come down in the recent years, in spite of about 23-24 million tons of pulse production that we are making, purely because the population is galloping, protein production is taking a hit. So the challenge is not just the food productivity, but also the nutritional security. Next slide. Now, in these 8 countries in South Asia, what is it very distinct as compared to many other parts of the world is we are very young, poor, very less land, very poor soil health. Absolutely, you can see in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and many other countries, biodiversity has gone through the roof. And the challenge is we just not only have to enhance food and nutritional security, but we have to give more attention to sustainability through scientific processes. Next slide. We have a lot of, look back and say, oh, green revolution ushered in a lot. True. We can be proud of some of the achievements that we have made. Hybrids, water, plant protection, all contributed to it. But how come, in spite of all this, our protein intake per capita has come down? Water table has gone down across the country. Environment, I don't say. I once told Dr. Mahapatra in a meeting, if we have to have, air purifiers and drinking water bottle, then what is left to live in Delhi? Pests and diseases are increasing. Many of you must have heard very recently some of the diseases in cattle, which were resulted in thousands of cattle which perished due to a disease which is caused by a virus. Where did we go wrong? Should we continue in the same path? Is it productivity versus sustainability, or it is productivity with sustainability? Absolutely, it is productivity with sustainability. Next slide. Next slide. Somebody operating the slides?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It got stuck somewhere. I'm sorry. Ambayni pilavamma.
So the question is, what many of us do not understand is, what is sustainability? Sustainability has become a buzzword, and like 5 blind men, different persons touch sustainability in very different ways. Sustainability in a short is ability to harness the today's resources maximum without impacting the resources of the future generation. That means I have no objection if you can use the resources today, but make sure that the very same natural resources, water, soil health, plant genetic diversity, and everything should not impact the future generations. That is what we mean by the sustainability. Now, in spite of, you can see from 1960, the population has been growing. At least it will stabilize around 7 to 7.5 billion. But the farm land per capita has diminished. And from the same acre, from 3 to we have to feed 8.3 people, both in terms of calorie intake and protein intake. South Asia, when I mean India, South Asia is at the rock bottom. Not just in terms of calories, also in terms of the protein intake. And when I mean calories, there are two types of malnutrition. There is less nutrition, and there is also obesity associated with in many of the towns and other things. In order to meet our future, we have to go melee. Not only the quality, but quantitative challenges has to be addressed. Next slide. Now, let me just come to this is a very important slide. We all glorified the Green Revolution, but in the 1962, as many of you know, the Silent Spring, it is one of the books they say that changed the world. And what it brought is, for the first time, whether we are talking about Environmental Protection Agency, environment, ecosystem, sustainability, the seeds of this whole thing was sown by Rachel Carlson in response to some of the organophosphates, DDT and others. The more clearly we can focus attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for destruction. She told it in Rachel Carlson in 1962. She was joked, she was made into a caricature, cartoons came in the process, but what ultimately, like Darwin was, everybody is beginning to realize what a great prophecy that it was, and the pest management and many others that we are talking is the seed sown by the Rachel Carlson. Next slide. Now, in the light of all this, when I was in Biodiversity International, we organized the first Agrobiodiversity conference. And you may not believe, the first Agrobiodiversity conference was inaugurated, and the keynote speaker was the Prime Minister himself. For a nearly 1 hour, 15 minutes, he spoke on what is the topic that we are discussing today. And this has come to be known as the Delhi Declaration. And the main salient outcome of this meeting was it adopted an agrobiodiversity declaration on agrobiodiversity, development of an agrobiodiversity index, and United Nations should declare an year of agrobiodiversity. Certainly, agrobiodiversity index is one of the key take-home messages that came. When I mean agrobiodiversity, let us not misunderstand that it is only restraints to crop. We always somehow think that agriculture means crops. No, it's not like that. Biodiversity is very complex, as you can understand in the following slides. Next slide. Who are our Indian farmers? If you clearly see, 67% or 68% are only very marginal farmers with 1 to 2 hectares. 17.9 are very small farmers. Together, you can see that more than 80-85% of our farmers are absolutely very small scale farmers. And whatever agrobiodiversity, sustainability that we are talking has to touch the top 2, and the others can take care of themselves. This is something which is very critical if we have to understand how do we go forward. Next slide. The global food production, which is one of the largest driver of environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. More than anything else, the way that we have been expanding agricultural frontiers, and everything has become a homogenization of diets. Only rice, wheat, maize, potato, and a few other crops. And in horticulture crops, tomato, potato, and maybe onions, they corner everything at the cost of all the others. And in the process of human development, increase in human population, more area and agriculture, intensification of agriculture, more irrigation, the natural resource degradation. Let me share with you the Western Ghats, which was once we thought is one of the most stable, every year is experiencing mild earthquakes. Now the hillocks are collapsing. And people are literally worried about the future of Western Ghats, which resulted in Western Ghats a commission, which the farmers are still finding difficult to accept. But the writing is on the wall. Next slide. 6 areas where biodiversity can contribute to risk mitigation is: biodiversity can address malnutrition. It can address climate change variability, land degradation, pest and diseases, biodiversity loss, and lastly, all these leads to biodiversity can at least minimize a lot of poverty trap. Look at Pakistan today, which I'll be coming today. I was reading the editorial of Dan. Nearly 1/3 to half of the country is in the floods. And once I would like to tell what is the statement of Ganeshaya, who made a very beautiful discourse on sexual selection and genetics. He told that there are a number of countries where polygamy is practiced, and considering the ratio of 1 male to 1 female, in many of the countries where polygamy is practiced, 100 females are taken by 75 males. The 25 males do not have the company of the females. Second equation he drew was, the richer you are, you have more than one wife, at least in most places. So the 25% of the people who don't have women's company are also poor, unemployed, and these are the people where they are the sitting ducks for the terrorists to intervene and cajole them to do these kinds of things. And if you look into the world map, you will see where polygamy is there and where there is a poverty is rampant. That is where the terrorism is also emanating. Why I am trying to tell is biodiversity can have a number of implications, including poverty and our social setup. Next slide. Now, I am just coming to, since most of you are from the rice and other things, I would there was a Times editorial on water in India. I'm sure many of you would have read. Poor rainfall in Eastern India. I have concised the editorial. In Eastern India is a reminder for water conservation. There is a need to relook at the cropping pattern. We have to have a serious relook at the cropping pattern. China is suffering worse drought, unprecedented drought in Europe, water shortage in the Colorado River Basin. July and August, the dry spell in Eastern India is going to impact rice production. And there is a strong link between paddy and water shortage. Irrigation takes 90% of our groundwater in our country. We spend 2 to 4 times more water for irrigation than China, and climate smart agriculture technologies are required. I think this is very relevant considering the crop that you are researching, because there is no more room for complacency and serious thoughts have to come. Next slide. Now look at this, why frequent disasters. We had Uttarakhand disasters, Srinagar flooding, Cyclone Hudhud, Chennai tsunami, and the Pakistan floods of 2022. Pakistan's of floods of 22, almost in a country which is hand to mouth, begging for IMF loans, and with all kinds of political problems, the last thing that they wanted was this kind of an aberration. The answer is ground cover, deforestation, tree barriers, loss of mangroves and other things. Writing is on the wall, and most of them are man-made problems. And today it is Pakistan. Let us not be thinking that to next year or something, we can be immune from it. What happens in one part of the globe can easily occur elsewhere. Next slide. This is the Kerala floods a couple of years back. Unprecedented rains in Kerala. And we did a small study when I was in Biodiversity, along with some of the international experts. We found that when there is a drought followed by flood, all the beneficial microbes and microarthropods in the soil to the tune of 70% get destroyed. And that is where the sustainability of the soil takes a very serious hit. And the last one, the flooding is not just because of everything is heavy rains. We have dumped plastic across the world. The bird that you see is the one whose beak is entangled in a plastic cover, as it is, it's not able to. Just a symbolic, but the way most of the flooding that occurs, even today in Bangalore, one of the cities which we were proud, and today it is in a state, it is all man-made disasters. And something seriously we have to think about. Next slide. Now, next. Now, next slide. Yeah, previous slide, please. Now, this is with respect to paddy. It's okay. Next slide. Now, next slide. I'm briefly showing the tuber crops cassava. I don't know if many of you know, cassava was introduced in a very strong way by the Maharaja of Travancore. And when the entire country suffered from the Great Bengal famine, the only state which did not suffer was the Kerala state because of the introductions of the tuber crops. So we have to understand, for even today in Africa, it is one of the most important crops for their survival. And what we have done is, cassava has too much gone into a background, and as a result, we are not making the kind of investment that we should be making under most adverse conditions. Next slide. Next, this is other one, tuber crop. Next slide. Now, in addition to the rice, wheat, and others, the three native fruits of this country are jack, mango, and banana. Jackfruit is there, and in North India they call katal, one of the richest source of nutrition, and for some reason we have least bit focused on this particular crop. The diversity is humongous, availability is humongous, the products could be very beautifully utilized for both for human nutrition and animal nutrition, but the input that is going into the research is absolutely meager. And if we have to be sustainable, we have to capitalize on these kinds of crops for our livelihood. Next slide. This is just with respect to the underutilized cucurbits that you see in the east. We are only after cabbage, cauliflower, capsicum, but we have not really exploited the underutilized cucurbits, which can make a huge difference to the survival of the people who are poor, who cannot afford to buy some of these fruits unless, and these things are highly climate resilient. We have to reinvent some of these crops for the benefit of nutrition. Next slide. This is with respect to same thing with respect to leafy vegetables. Leafy vegetables, so much of diversity never have been mainstream. And one of the richest source, easily fast growing. Today, when we are talking about aeroponics and hydroponics, one of the crops which we are totally focusing is the leafy vegetables. Quick growing, absolutely it can be safe, no heavy metal contamination, and can provide vast answers to our nutrition deficiency. Next slide. Next slide. This is with some of the crops of the future. Chow chow. The entire Northeast literally stands on chow chow. And many other crops, vegetable soybean, which AVRDC is promoting. And there are so many other crops. The list is endless. We have to diversify our diet. Diversity in diet. The more colorful diet is yours, the more nutritionally secure you are. Next slide. The thing that bothers me again is with regard to the mushrooms. China consumes 1,500 grams of mushrooms per capita per day, per year, whereas our consumption is about 50 grams. One of the richest source of vitamin D, especially for vegetarians. And it does not require fertilizers and pesticides. It can be homegrown. In spite of it, all this, the inroads that we have made into mushrooms, there is a tremendous scope, especially in urban and peri-urban system, even in the villages, to address the drastic deficiency of vitamin D, which can come through some of the liver oils of fish and many other things. Next slide. Now, this is just to show the kind of diversity of banana that we have. This country was known for the diversity of banana. You go to Kerala, they call Nendran and many other things. You go to Tamil Nadu, Naipuvan. Kannada, they call Rasbali. In Andhra Pradesh, you have Sakrapalli. In Orissa, you have Lord Jagannath wants one particular type of fruit. You go to the country, we had different type. But one technology of tissue culture, 70% of our banana that is cultivated today are all Cavendish G9 type. And what has happened? Next slide. This is the incidence of Fusarium wilt on Cavendish. Cavendish came into this world because the Gros Michel variety of banana, which was earlier being cultivated, was eliminated from the face of the earth. Later on, a small clone which was maintained in the Kew Gardens is the today Cavendish banana. This Cavendish banana became very popular because of tissue culture and resistance to Fusarium wilt. But one super race of tropical race 4 broke down the resistance and totally destroyed in UP, Bihar and others. Timely precautions taken by Biodiversity as well as ICAR prevented the spread of this disease to south. This is the problem when we are going more and more towards monocropping of a single variety or a single clone. Next slide. This is a slide which I am drawing in the attention of why chikungunya is coming all of a sudden. In the entire Kerala, the forests were replaced by indiscriminate rubber plantations. Indiscriminate rubber plantations, monocropping, rubber tapping, coconut shells for tapping, fresh water that is collecting coconut shells were the ideal breeding grounds for chikungunya in the early part of 2000. And the laborers who come for rubber tapping migrated to different regions and thereby spreading chikungunya and dengue. We never used to have chikungunya. I had never heard about chikungunya, at least till about 2000. We thought it's a disease of the Latin America. But today it is rampant, mainly because we totally disturbed the biodiversity of the place. And Albopictus was a dominant species which pushed the Aedes aegypti into the huts of the laborers, thereby spreading the viruses. But these are all some of the impacts of biodiversity which are not really well articulated for us to understand the importance. Next slide. The biodiversity laws, we have approximately 390,000 identified plant species, about with 5,500 crops can be used for human beings, but we consumed only mainly 3 cereals and altogether about 12 crops. Our genetic base has come down so drastically when it comes to what we are consuming the maximum. Next slide. But biodiversity, when I talk, I am always at a loss when I talk to ICAR. ICAR thinks biodiversity means plant genetic resources. Somehow the mindset is not going beyond the plant genetic resources. As it was said by your director, it has a provisioning role, it has a supporting role, it has a regulating role, it has a cultural aspect, and it is a melting pot of everything. How many of us can really afford? Dr. Jansi says she is retiring next year. One thing in her mind will be, if there is some problem, medical problem, will I be really able to foot the bill? Certainly, considering the hospitals and the exorbitant charges, we may have to go back to our strength in medicinal plants for some of these things. Fresh water is disappearing. Waste is everywhere. The impact of pollination is the melting pot of biodiversity and ecosystem and sustainability are all interlinked. And unless we understand the complex mathematics of this, our life is at peril. Next slide. Biodiversity, different persons understand it in a different way, but biodiversity is a variability among living organisms, both within and among the species and within among the ecosystem. Biodiversity consists of a number of ecosystems. It could be a soil, it could be desert, it could be pond, it could be trees, but all the sometimes a huge banyan tree itself could be an ecosystem. Biodiversity is one of the main source of food and plant genetic resources. Anytime you touch a biodiversity, it is going to impact the ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are those services which we have taken for granted. Mother's love, fresh water, fresh air. These are all, we have taken it for granted. What is the value of a fresh water when you are in the desert and absolutely there is no water? What is the value of a fresh air in Delhi, especially in December and January? These are ecosystem services. We took it for granted and we are paying the price. There is an Indian concept of biodiversity and there is a Western concept of biodiversity. The Western concept of biodiversity, which is absolutely ridiculous, is the entire biodiversity is for the welfare of human beings. The Eastern philosophy is conservation of biodiversity contributes to the welfare of human beings. The biodiversity, the more and more you exploit nature for our welfare, the nature is going to pay you back. So human is a component and a dominant species of the ecosystem, but we should not ignore the ecosystem per se. Next slide. Next. Now, ecosystem services in biodiversity, what is the thing is, as long as we maintain the equilibrium, biodiversity is stable. For example, a forest. Nobody applies fertilizer, nobody applies pesticides, nobody irrigates. A tree is going to fall, something is going to sprout, a bird is going to die, something else will breed, and the stability of the ecosystem is equilibrium is maintained, as well as in the ocean. Biodiversity generates and preserves the soil, renews their fertility, litter to organic matter. They stabilize the climate. Go to any greenery, you will understand. Even within a city, green patches give that stabilization of climate, purify air and water, regulate disease-carrying organisms, as I said, in case of chikungunya, pollination of crops, dispersal of seeds, cycle and move the nutrients, and control, above all, vast majority of agricultural pests. These are all some of the roles that the ecosystem services and biodiversity play in our nature. Next slide. Amongst all the entire insects, hardly 1% maybe, or 1 to 1.5%, let us assume, as something that are causing serious damages. Even then, believe me, most of them have their own wonderful natural remedies. In our anxiety to spray, even when you see a small semilooper on a godforsaken crop, we do more harm than good. In fact, pesticide I call as this, it's a problem to the solution. You think pesticide is a solution, but many times they are the problems, because nothing on this earth can destroy biodiversity as effectively as a pesticide, especially insecticides. Next slide. See, why forests have less disease and pests? It is naturally regulated. And biodiversity does not mean plant genetic resources. We have to recognize this aspect. I would again hammer on plant breeders, just to say that, or for that matter, even entomologists, or for that matter, somebody working in animal science, diversity and biodiversity are two different aspects. We should not use one for the other in very loose ways. And it works in a complex maths. It does not mean that 1 + 1 is equal to 2 in biodiversity. It is a very complex maths. And the most important thing in biodiversity is maintenance of the equilibrium. Next slide. What are ecosystem services worth? Now, for example, what we take pollination and biological control. For example, Jhansi knows the papaya millibug that was controlled, we estimated, and in a matter of few years, the returns just by the introduction of one obscure parasitoid was worth crores and crores of rupees. The same thing applies to now a number of eucalyptus gall wasp. A parasitoid for the eucalyptus gall wasp literally saved the industry. Some of the parasites saved the American citrus industry. There are innumerable examples. But what has happened is, none of us have really documented in terms of monetary value the contributions that have been made. And 1/3 of the human food plants are pollinated by wild pollinators. Work carried out by Biodiversity International has said coffee yields can grow nearly 30% if pollination is effective. Cardamom yields will drastically go down if there is no pollination. And I will not emphasize, we have seen in temperate regions, the quality of apples drastically takes a nosedive without the adequate pollination. We all appreciate the value of the pollination in oil palms, which was harbored a revolution by the introduction of a simple insect. In fact, it was smuggled and reintroduced. Next slide. The other aspects which I would say biodiversity contributes is the wild species. If all the breeding material that we are seeing, whether it is maize, whose progenitors are teosinte, or whether it is the okra, present day okra, whose progenitors are Abelmascus manihat, and if it is tomato, it is Lycopersicum hirsutum. You take any crop, in every crop today's hybrids have their progenitors in wild species. And biodiversity loss is actually loss of wild species, related wild species. And those wild species through evolution carry some of the most resistant genes, which will be answerable to our future sustainable agriculture. So one of the inputs that we can do is we have to go in a big way, either through cryoconservation or pollen conservation or through maintenance. In fact, in ICAR, there is not one block which exclusively is catering to conservation of wild species of different crops. And if you have to do sustainable agriculture, better earmark. I know in Hyderabad, there is NBPGR. If somebody is there, this is something that they should seriously look into. Next slide. Just we said, this is from Andaman and Nicobar. I just showed a slide. You see the number of wild species that, for example, some, brinjal shoot and fruit borer. There is a wild species called Solanum macrocarpon, which is very highly resistant to brinjal shoot and fruit borer. And work done at IIHR, I believe, has successfully introgressed the wild genes. Dr. Datta's contribution of okra resistance to yellow vine mosaic was through introgression of the wild species. We have the success that we see in case of custard apple or Kasahan, where 200 to 700 grams, the fruit weight increased was due to introduction of wild genes from the wild. So we have to really look into some of these species, profile them for the conservation of the genes, which itself is a conservation of biodiversity. Next slide. This is Mangifera andamanica. It doesn't even look like a mango tree, but one of the wild species in mango. Next slide. Just to show some of them. Mangifera camptosperma. You see the plants which are so different. Next slide. And these are all Mangifera griffithii. So these, you look at the color of those fruits. Today, tomorrow, most persons are going to buy mango, not just by how it is tasting, but the color plays an important role. Next slide. Now, there is a concept in biodiversity called as the custodian farmers. Custodian farmers are those farmers who take pride in conservation of diversity. You would have seen some farmers conserving 400, 500 varieties of rice. There are farmers who conserve diversity of mango. Some conserve diversity of some other crop. And these are the farmers who do out of passion, out of their commitment for nature. We have to recognize them. We have to give them impetus. We have to advertise their conservation that is taking place, and from there choose the elite lines and distribute to others so that we get the best of the lines. The concept of custodian farmers was introduced by Biodiversity International when we were in I was at DDG, and also with IIHR. Some of the best mango lines were conserved in Chittoor. Probably Sridevi is also aware of it. And what they do is the conservation that extends the pollination time, answers to some of the best answers to problems associated with pests and diseases. Next slide. But in all this, there is a role of the participation of the community, especially women. If they take active interest, and if men include them in their everyday, day to day, and as a society we move forward, then only this is possible. So biodiversity, ecosystem, and sustainability cannot happen through societal participation, especially of the other gender. Next slide. Now, the other aspect that we are talking is about organic cultivation. Now, there are two schools of thought. We say, yes, organic cultivation is not possible. There is another who is blind. I have never seen a farmer who has gone to organic cultivation again say, I'll come back and apply fertilizer. I was very happy to see some of the farmers who are practicing sericulture few months back. In Corona, 2.5 years, 3 years, they never had any market. They never applied fertilizers and pesticides to their soil. And when they came back, the price of the silk was more than 1,000 rupees per kg. And this, I repeat the words of the farmers. Once I apply fertilizers and pesticide, whatever I do, it will take 7 to 8 years for me to rear a sustainable silk. We are very happy we did not go that way. So this is organic cultivation is possible provided you identify a crop, the season, and as well as the place where it is ideal. If you want to grow cauliflower in summer, and if you want to grow tomato in a rainy season in September and expect that it has to be organic, I think we are living in a fool's paradise. But there are crops which are to be exported, medicinal plant, spices, coffee, where if there is a market internationally, go for it. For example, tender coconut. Tender coconut which is given to a patient has to be organic because that demands it. Next slide. One of the answers again for many of the problem is protected cultivation. Jhansi has worked a lot on protected cultivation. Protected cultivation, it is possible to grow excellent crops, minimizing pesticides, minimizing the load if you know how to do it scientifically. For example, aeroponics and hydroponics, you can be absolutely free of any pesticide and get 8 to 10 times more yield as well as with the zero pesticide residue limit. I'll show you a next slide. Next slide, go to the next slide. This is one of the things, probably Jhansi was there when we did the experiment on the cultivations of the large eggplants. Simple, low-cost net house prevented 100% fruit borer damage with no leaf hopper damage, no little leaf. When we are discussing so much about BT brinjal, the sustainable cultivation of the bottle brinjal lies in low-cost net house. So it is not that we don't have answers. We don't have to run behind what the West does is always great. So there is a different method. We have to apply science-led agriculture in this. Next slide. This is, I'm just coming to the coconut. One of the most important crops. Worldwide, the market is increasing and worldwide, the production is going down through the years. It applies to Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. Most of the coconut that we have are senile. Whether it is tender coconut, virgin coconut oil, or copra, everything the demand is exponentially increasing. Production is taking a nosedive. Next slide. We have to do, for example, in the case of coconut, which occupies a large area, there is a need to have sustainable development by planting the fresh palms. We are seriously suffering due to coconut lethal wilt and many others that needs to be addressed. Next slide. Now, when it comes to sustainability and biodiversity, we only focus the macro, like many of the foresters who focus only on elephants and tigers, and others are not focused. Likewise, when we are talking about soil health, we only talk about soil nutrition, but we are never really looking into the microbes and microarthropods that are there in the soil. The real soil health that we are talking is about 0.7 millimeters to maybe 2-3 millimeters in size. The columbolans, the proturans, the diplurans, and many others, they are the ones which are shredding the litter, making for the microbes to act. And unfortunately, I would like to say there is no work going on in soil microarthropods, the foundation of soil fertility, soil health, and sustainability in India. Very, very, very sad to say this, but that is the truth. We have 18 persons working on trichoderma. We don't have persons working on some of the most important things. Next slide. This is how the litter is set. Next slide. By the microarthropods. Next slide. Another thing which I think is previous slide. Another thing that somebody should really focus is on the role of entomopathogenic nematodes. The sustainable management of most of the insects associated with the root, whether it is white grub or any of the other insects, including termites, is excellent use of entomopathogenic nematodes. The work has recently started. We have to accelerate the process. Next slide. No use in applying phorate and carbofuran and many other things. Pollination is one of the finest examples of ecosystem services. Everybody talks, no clearly documented data. And go ahead with the slides. I will explain. Next. You can see that both with respect to in fruits and vegetables, in terms of parts, numbers, weight, pollination very significantly contributes. In the case of apples, clearly there was about 20 to 25% increase in size. This is an example of the classical sustainable development, where a father and son devised a wonderful method whereby you don't have to touch the bees. You just open the tap and the honey will flow. You don't have to do anything. If you really want to contribute to sustainable pollination, sustainable development goals, science-led sustainable development, we have to come up with those kinds. I have been requesting ever since I was a DDG across the universities, across the research stations. Can any one of you replicate? They say yes, sir, but so far not even one has attempted. We are software engineers, but we cannot make a simple bee yield honey directly as Westerners have done it. In the case of pollination, I would also like to draw the attention that we are only talking about Apis dorsata indica, but Apis serrana indica, we are never touching on the rock bees. There is no work going on in the rock bees. Rock bees are one of the excellent indicators of climate change. Rock bees are one of the excellent indicators of biodiversity loss. And no work is going on. And it is very sorry to state that rock bees have shifted to the urban areas, because in the forest, the trees that once were providing shelter to them are being removed. Now high-rise apartments in the urban areas have become one of the most sought-after places for the rock bees. That is where they should not be. These are some of the things which we have to balance between urban and rural in our sustainable development. Next slide. Of course, insecticides, you know. In order for many of the biological control to success, this is mass multiplication. Next slide. Now the shade trees, when we are talking about the one thing that bothers me again is whenever we want to contribute to nature, plant 1,000 trees of whatever you mango, 1,000 trees of tamarind, 1,000 trees of guava. No, there is a concept called as the functional diversity and numerical diversity. You have to understand what trees have to fit in where. It is said that when Akbar was the king, it seems that Birbal told him, don't plant mango trees all along the streets. But Akbar said, why? It will help people, let them also eat mangoes. And later on, he came to know that the slug caterpillars, which pupate on the bark, were one of the main source of the skin itchiness. And suddenly Akbar realized these are the trees not meant for the roads. So we have to understand the abundance of trees in relation to pollination, both from the nesting, pollen, and nectar point of view. Next slide. Next slide. Next. This is not, I will not go, but we did a 50-year analysis in Biodiversity International as to what are the factors that are driving the pollinator abundance and diversity in different parts of the world. Clearly, the West is West and East is East. The reasons that are driving the pollinators out in the West and the ones that are doing in the East are way different. We have to address our problems locally, and no help will come from international. Next slide. This is with respect to the gaps in the Indian agriculture. I can share the slides. Habitat modification, shortage of nesting sites, climate change, indiscriminate pesticide use. These are the ones that are mainly responsible here. Next slide. Not just the pollinators and biological control. You can see whenever you see a BBC Earth, you will see a dung roller. You will see there are so many others which are contributing. And I would say that we need more investment in science. Investment in science have absolutely gone down. And I find that we are unable to appreciate and contribute unless the inputs to science come in a big way. Next slide. Next. Yeah, one of the things to understand first in the development of an agrobiodiversity index is you cannot measure the diversity or count all the diversity that is present. Like a farmer will look into the soil and say if there are more earthworms, it is fertile. We have to identify what are called as the keystone species. It may be trichoderma, it may be earthworms, it may be carabids, it may be pollinators, it may be rock bee colonies, it may be the presence of drango as a bird, or there are many other indicators that contribute, should collectively contribute to the measuring the agrobiodiversity index. And this exercise is already going on in place, and the National Bureau of Agriculturally Important Microorganisms and many others are working in this direction to identify the keystone species. Next slide. Next slide. Next, previous slide. Yeah, next. Next. Now, when I mean sustainable development, it does not mean that only you, for example, India, whenever we talk about silk, we only talk about mulberry silk. But we have eri silk, we have tassar silk, we have muga silk, we have oak tassar, and we have different types of tassar. For those of you who don't know, muga silk is present only in India, and it is the golden silk and the costliest silk. All these are part and parcel of agriculture, especially among the tribal community, and their sustainability depends on conservation of forest. Because many of the what we call vanya silk, that is the muga silk and tassar silk, can be cultivated only on the natural trees. They cannot be that. Eri can be domesticated, but not others. So there is a need to understand when we are talking about sustainability, sericulture becomes part of agriculture, like apiculture. Next slide. This is about the map of the sericulture map of India, especially northeast and eastern parts of the country are very rich, and the farmer's life totally depends on the income. In some parts of the northeast, the pupae of the eri silks are also consumed as a daily diet. Next slide. Now this, just look at it. This is a slide to show the livelihood of so many women are dependent on the successful cultivation of some of these silkworms. If you want to really, we have to address sustainable development goal. Our aim should be the poorest of the poor should have a sustainable living. You cannot, totally shake their knowledge and ask them to eat wheat and cauliflower. You have to grow with them. One of the things that biodiversity can wonderfully address is the man-animal conflict. Every time we go, we have a problem of nilgai, we have a problem of wild boar. There is no silver bullet to address the problem of man-animal conflict unless and until you understand the biodiversity, you understand the requirements. Today's newspaper says in Jharkhand or someplace, they have told, leave the elephants alone. Don't simply blindly construct elephant corridors and say that elephants are coming into your place. Everywhere now, there is a concept called as the sugarcane leopards. They are coming into the sugarcane field because they don't have anywhere else to go. And this is one area where biodiversity, in fact, Indian Institute of Science was asked, we will give you 1 crore, can you manage the elephant menace? They said that, sir, we study elephants, but we cannot give you solutions. The answer that I'm trying to tell is, we have to provide these kinds of answers by understanding biodiversity. Insects by far are the 75 to 80% of the living things in the animal kingdom. We need to understand more, and also because I have a passion as an entomologist that I find that this aspect has not been given the due focus that it deserves from a biodiversity and ecosystem perspective. Next slide. They came into this world about 400 million years back. We came to this world about 2 to 4 million years back. Don't think you can eradicate cockroach by spraying something. If my evolutionary age is 1, they are 100 years old. The same now, these are all things that we have to. If we reproduce, make a human being can make a maximum of 27 babies, look at the termites, which can make maybe 30,000 eggs per day and can live for 10 to 18 years. Termites are going to be one of the major problems with climate change, dry weather, drought, and deforestation. Next slide. So use them for what they are instead of destroying from the very face of the earth. Next slide. So this is just an example of the papaya mealybug. In front of Tamil Nadu Agriculture University, farmers had get out and stopped all the trucks moving because of papaya mealybug became a problem. Next slide. A small parasitoid and we are also responsible. We only think through Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, but we moved the material to every market in the process transporting the papaya mealybug. Unless our policies are also in place, you cannot fight these kinds. And the greatest threat to this country, as I see from another perspective, is our quarantine is a joke. Anything can come into this country and then this is with respect to spiraling whitefly, very successfully controlled through biologically. Next slide. Papaya mealybug parasitoid. Next slide. This is an example which I would like to say that many a times we have a feeling that the biological control is not very effective when it comes to management of the viruses, insect transmitted viruses. We worked out in papaya ring spot virus, which is aphid transmitted. The migration of aphids takes place when the population density of the aphid increases. When the population density increases, they put more of their alate forms, and alate dispersing forms are the ones which spread the virus. But if biological control is effective, there is no explosion of the population, as a result, no alate formation. So there is we have to go deeper in our understanding as to what factors are playing a role. Don't look aphid as a transmitter, but see whether there are alates in the population which can spread the virus. Next slide. Next slide. Now, whenever we talk about India, we forget about Andaman, which everybody thinks only as a picnic spot. Andaman, nearly 80% is a wonderful natural biodiversity. It has got a 400 to 600 miles of different islands, extremely rich in biodiversity. Each island is worth a study. And we have to understand Little Nicobar, and the Little Andamans, Lower Andamans, North Andamans. So beautiful is their biodiversity. Each island, when the tsunami came, a small rock in front of the Port Blair absolutely prevented the destruction of Port Blair. Next slide. But when we talk about Andaman, the tribes also come into picture. They have a tremendous wisdom and knowledge. They have their own tuber crops. They have their own crops that they consume. They have a method of hunting. They know which fish it is. Unfortunately, even in the diversity of fishes, instead of grass carp, silver carp, rohu, katla, which was once the order, today everybody is talking about a fish called tilapia. And I was told that it is one of the most useless fishes, but cultivated everywhere because it multiplies very rapidly. And we are losing the qualitative aspects of the diversity, and only for the purpose. Your own state, in Andhra Pradesh, Khammam, and we surveyed, we found that Godavari is one of the most polluted, where we could see literally everywhere pesticide residues, and the places where fishes are largely multiplied are one of the most polluted in the entire Godavari basin. Next slide. But the paddy, or even for that matter, many other crops, when we are talking, we have a huge coastal line. And in the whole huge coastal line, there are things that are happening is with respect to mangroves, which is the first line of defense whenever there is a super cyclone or anything. When the super cyclone hit the Andhra Pradesh, Chandrababu Naidu asked, what trees, what pattern? When the roof of the Vijayawada airport blew off, he said, what can I do and what can I plan to prevent this further? But when you are talking about mangroves, even before the mangroves, there are corals. Corals are simply depleting, especially due to acidification of the ocean, increase in the ocean temperature, are combined with the warmer air, all contributing to severe cyclone and eradications of the acidification, leading to the erosion of the corals. Destruction of the corals is the first step towards our destruction itself. Corals bleaching between 2005 and 2010, you can see fishes and tourism are greatly affected. And the farmers who depend on these corals, especially during lean period, if there is a coral loss, they were told very clearly in Andamans, they go without food. Next slide. I will not go into this. This is more highly vulnerable and a fragile system. Next slide. Now, I will just summarize now with a few very thought-provoking questions. Ecosystem contributes to controlling large number of agricultural pests, maintain biodiversity. I think I went through all this. Go to the next slide. But what is really required and the way forward is, in this country, we are growing the crops in a very unscientific way. Maharashtra, which should not be growing sugarcane, grows sugarcane. Maharashtra, which should not be growing grapes and pomegranate, is growing grapes. Punjab, which was never habituated to grow rice, is probably the largest producer of rice. And I do not know how it is all going to impact on nature. We have to develop an agro-ecosystem specific approach based on 14 agroecosystems and 5 agroecosystems and 14 production systems was very clearly demarcated in threadbare discussions that took place in ICAR a couple of years back. And how best we can mainstream it so that we don't go through this process is something for all of us. And in the process, research can only give guidelines. The implementation is something which needs to be done by the policymakers. Next slide. Advertisement, books. Biodiversity is not just a fancy topic. Everybody must begin to understand and appreciate. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. I don't know what's happened. Next slide. I will just briefly touch upon the invasives. If I gave a presentation to the FAO with regard to the pest preparedness, pandemics, and preparedness, and we listed many of the topics. One of the things that I listed there was the lumpy skin disease is going to hit this country about 1.5 years back. 3 to 5 days back, you would have seen the lumpy skin disease, which is a viral disease transmitted by ticks and flies. Thousands of cattle perished in North India. We have to understand that every invasive is a threat to biodiversity and biosecurity. We have seen with Parthenium, we have seen with water hyacinth, we have seen with coconut mite. We have seen it so many others. Next slide. Even after 20 years, coconut mite is a reality. We have not been able to manage it successfully. Next slide. Now, when we are talking about biodiversity, how do we measure biodiversity, at least from an agricultural sense? Varietal diversity, species diversity, functional diversity. I would like to stress upon, this is a difficult part. Functional diversity, there is a school of microbiomes that is increasing. That is, the microbiome or the microbial load associated with the rhizosphere. One of my students is working on the microbiome associated with the stigma of flowers. They are the ones which are controlling many of the functions of the plant and not the plant per se. Pollinator diversity, underutilized species, soil biodiversity, and landscape biodiversity. All these factors contribute to the different indicators through which we can measure biodiversity, at least agrobiodiversity. Next slide. What is the way forward? Biodiversity has to be integrated. Plants, animals, fishes, microbes, pollinators, insects, and there is a combined integration that is required. When Dr. Padoda celebrated 75 years, there was a meeting, and this is when a step was taken, and after that, everybody forgot about it. We need to understand the complex interactions that take place between this. We need to interpret a data which is a little complex. We need both international and national collaboration. Indexing is important, and inform the ecological, economic, and environmental impacts of this to the policymakers, and so that sustainable development goals can take place. Next slide. Now, coming very clearly, some of the questions that I would pose to you, all of you. Another 3-4 slides I'll complete. Are we producing more rice and wheat? Is it the problem of our sustainable development? Is it the problem associated with agriculture? I read about the editorials in Times. The answer is both yes and no. Because this country has, let us say that we produce 300 million tons of rice or wheat put together. If you produce 270 million tons, there is going to be tremendous shortage. If you produce 40 million tons more, you don't have a place to store. So we are very little elastic, but small elasticity will contribute to high volatility. Food basket is shrinking across the world. We thought that we are sitting on 45 million tons of grains and everything is eaten by the rats. But today, all of a sudden, one Ukraine war and a little bit of drought, and India said that we are not going. The Prime Minister Modi said we can feed the world. Within 1 month, he said that we are not exporting rice. Ukraine war and many of please go back. Ukraine war impacts both wheat, and when wheat is impacted, demand for rice will increase. So you have to be very careful on a yearly basis, and you cannot say that we are simply come to a blind conclusion. We are increasing rice. No, without rice, there is no food. Let us also be clear about it. You have to have adequate buffer. But when you have adequate buffer, again, should we blindly go for rice? Is the question. This year, China will face a food shortage. But what I request all of you is, how much is the surplus? How much is there in our basket? How much we can plan it for the next year? The aspect that bothers to me about sustainability is, sustainability should be calibrated for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. You cannot say that 3 years down the line sustainable. No, sustainability is the future. But how long is that future? Now, if you talk about that future, what is the demographic role that is coming into picture? The population structure or the population. See, as people begin to age, and already India is becoming a aging population, more than 45, 50 years, they don't want to consume cereals. But at the same time, indiscriminate consumption of rice and wheat. It is said, Dr. Swaminathan used to say, there is an intellectual dwarfism. We are only consuming rice and wheat with no nutrition. So how much of cereals? This is a plan that has to be done at a very high level, involving scientists at the highest level, not IAS officers. In this country, policies are made by IAS officers. If they are made by scientists, it will be more meaningful. Is there too much focus on rice and wheat at the cost of others? My answer is yes. I was in Krishi Bhavan for 5 years. 40, 50 million tons of excess production was there. But whenever we talked about horticulture, the discussion 80% was only rice and wheat. Karenge, nutrition security, horticulture is important, but rest all discussion is only rice and wheat. Oil seed and pulses. Is there a stepmotherly treatment to horticulture in research? I would put the question to all of you. I will not answer. My answer is yes. What about global population decline in different parts of the world? When I meant demography, Jeff Bezos, one of the richest persons in the world, 2 days said that the earth is facing the problem of very few human beings in very near future. He is very strongly advocating the West and many other countries to have more babies. The reason why I'm bringing that is demography dictates the sustainability. If population pressure is the root cause for many of the today's problem, the same population erosion will be the problem for many of the other problems also of the world. Next slide. Is meat consumption sustainable? Many times when I said, are we giving a stepmotherly treatment? We also have to look into the animal meat, egg, poultry, and many other consumption. The Intercontinental Panel on Climate Change has very clearly said the consumption of meat is exponentially increasing across the world, and the world cannot sustain it because the unit production that goes, the natural resources that go for the production of unit calories of meat is 3 to 4 times higher than that of crops. Not to say that fish or meat should not be consumed, but the accelerated pace with which it is going, something serious thoughts have to be done. Will reduce birth rate balance, sustainable, and these are all thought processes that I am giving it to you. If I say sustainability in 60, 70 years, will the collapse of the population growth rate itself will rejuvenate the sustainable development? Forests will come, cities will shrink, nobody to occupy places, demand for food will come down. It is said that women's education is one of the best contraceptives for population growth. You educate a woman, and educated women have automatically well-documented answers are that the more the education, this was told by none other than Professor Ramesh Chand when we were talking, and he said this is he said, Kumar, the best contraceptive for population increase is women's education. But I am asking again a question. If there is a global population decline, is it also due to excessive women's education? The answer I would say is no, but also to say this is something that need to be discussed. You cannot brush. Can we have higher productivity with higher sustainability? Science-led agriculture can do. But this is which all of you are imposing. What is the difference between Punjab and the Kerala model with regard to the productivity of some of their crops? You know where Punjab stands today. You know where Kerala stands today. Punjab, high intensive, high fertilizer, high pesticide, improved varieties, hybrids, basmati rice, what not. Kerala, no roads, no industries, no development, high labor, and Kerala today is more sustainable than Punjab. The per capita income in Kerala is no less than that of Punjab. I can say probably an average farmer in Kerala is more at peace than an average farmer in Punjab. This is something, especially for the persons who are advocating rice, should make a comparison between which crop, where and when. How much of basmati rice are we going to go? Are we exporting water through agriculture? We are very proud in saying that we are 80,000 crores we are earning through basmati rice. Are we exporting water or basmati rice? How can we help South Asia and Africa? If you have to be sustainable, first you have to help your neighbors in Africa. Trade and commerce only plays a lip service to sustainability. I am a strong proponent of this. Trade and commerce, they only talk corporate social responsibility. These are all buzzwords. At the end of the day, they are all bloodsuckers. Is natural farming the answer? I don't think so. The entire scientific community said in NAS complex, but somehow the government took a policy. So the question that next slide, I think that's the last slide. Biodiversity ecosystem services are not just buzzwords. We need to have an ABD and a sustainable development index. Valuation of ecosystem services is required. What is the value of a pollination? For example, you introduced one particular insect for pollination of oil palm. What is its value today? Indirect benefits often weigh the direct benefits. We have to understand numerical and functional diversity, biodiversity, equilibrium. Biodiversity is not just for humans. Biodiversity is for the welfare of all living organisms, in which the welfare of human beings is also inbuilt. I think that's the last slide. Thank you very much for the patient hearing, and if there are any questions, I am free to take.
Sir, thank you very much. Your talk was very illuminating, and this is one topic wherein we didn't have any speakers in this particular important topic so far. And we profusely thank you for patiently delivering and covering a wide array of subjects related with agrobiodiversity, which I believe is the buzzword as on today, and then it will be the buzzword for future also. And you also covered the perils of or anticipated perils of climate change. And we also were also happy to understand the central role for insects in terms of sustaining and then fostering agrobiodiversity. And you also gave us some very colorful facets about insects. And from your talk, we understand that insects may not be, see, as pests, we can see them as a problem, but they will also in future form part of the solution. And I sincerely believe that maybe, if not now, when our cultural barriers perish, it's my humble suggestion or opinion that in future insects may be part of our food chain. I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but there are many traditional communities who eat termites or grasshoppers, and in addition to their role in ecosystem services, biodiversity and all, they could form an important component of our food chain. I may be wrong, but this is a point to think over. And as far as the security situation, which food security situation, which you had highlighted, I totally agree with you. Presently, we are producing enough of rice and nearly enough of wheat, but our buffer stocks are hardly about 25 or 30 million tons. This year, there is a reduction in area to the tune of about 3 or 4 million hectares, and already it is anticipated that we'll be producing 10 to 12 million tons of rice in a lesser, and export of non-basmati rice is under threat. So I totally agree with you. And some of the queries or questions what you raised, we may not have a clear-cut yes or no kind of answer, but these are all points for us to ponder, and we need to think further and then move in the forward direction. Sir, once again, sir, on behalf of ICAR Indian Institute of Rice Research, and also on behalf of Society for Advancement of Rice Research, one of the largest societies dedicated for rice research, wherein we have more than 1,000 members and including 500 life members. We thank you for your excellent lecture on the topic that is agrobiodiversity ecosystem services for sustainable agriculture. Sir, we would also like to present you a small token of appreciation on our part, sir. We will deliver it to you when we'll be coming to one of us will be coming to your say just one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So nice of you.
Yeah. So I'll just show you the certificate also, sir. So this is the certificate, sir. And then we profusely thank you for your lecture, which covered many facets of biodiversity and other aspects related to this thing. And now I understand that you are also not only a great entomologist, but also is an excellent or an outstanding thinker in terms of biodiversity or in terms of agrobiodiversity also. Thank you very much, sir. And I now invite all for if you have any questions, sir, shall we first read out the questions in the chat box?
Yeah, please.
So, madam, one of the rapporteurs can just initiate the question and answer session.
Dr. Shankar will moderate, sir.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir, for that very informative lecture. I mean, actually, your talk is right up my heart because I work in this field of biodiversity conservation and increasing biodiversity in rice fields. We have done a lot of work on increasing nutritional monetary benefits through the biodiversity of bund crops and using their ecological services, sir. And yes, in ICAR, always agrobiodiversity means crop diversity, sir. It never means insect biodiversity. But it was actually, your talk was actually directly attacking rice, sir.
No, because
sir, I would like to say rice is this much, vegetable is this much. That is the amount of research we will be having, sir. That is the importance also we will be having. Sir, actually, I have one question before I start moderating. One question is, sir, actually, from Biodiversity, do you sponsor any, you were talking about custodian farmers. So do you have custodian rights farmers supported by Biodiversity? And what sort of support can these farmers get from them? So because we know some of the farmers in Odisha who are doing this, they are conserving some seeds, and tribal farmers are conserving native seeds. So are you supporting them, and what sort of support do you give?
See, the PPV FRA, already a plant varieties protections and farmers' rights. There is a very nice body which is doing this kind
Yeah,
of
yes,
work,
sir.
and they also provide a lot of recognition. And there is in Tamil Nadu itself, there is a Nammalwar Foundation. So there are many organizations which so Gene Savior Award is given by the ICAR every year for. So there are a number of awards, and biodiversity will only work through the national system, because let me tell you very cautiously, don't allow the international players to take a foothold of this country's diversity. Let them operate only. You are very safe if it is operated through the organizations of national organization like ICR and
So are you doing some kind of support for rice?
Yeah. They were doing, but now it's about 2 years since I left. So they were doing, but I am not sure at this particular point of time what are the schemes that are going. And
So we would really like to collaborate on that, sir. That's why I asked about that.
I can let me just inquire. I will give the name of one person who is working in. Her name is, Smita. She is working in Bangalore Biodiversity. She is an excellent. I will send her name, this thing through her. You can work, and certainly they'll be more than happy, especially with regard to pollinator diversity and such other things they are doing.
So in fact, I would
Any
like
other
to,
questions, please?
I would just like to supplement what Chitra Madam told. For the past almost 7-8 years since Chitra Madam joined, our farms are very colorful, because Madam ensures that at least in a few of the rice, like say plots, we plant a lot of colorful flower species, which are attracting a lot of predators like tagetes and others. This thing, and Madam has also collected significant data about the benefits of maintaining biodiversity. Maybe it could be through bund planting, or it could be any other means. And I would say that our entomology group is going the right direction, and then doing a lot of pioneering work in this particular regard. So, sir, whenever you are in Hyderabad, just drop by here, sir.
Certainly, I'll
Please,
come.
yes, sir.
I'll come.
Yes, sir. Sir, we would invite you, and our institute is very near to the airport. You can stay in our guest house also.
No, I'll come. I come sometime. In fact, a few years back, I gave the role of horticulture in the edible oil segment, when something with regard to oil palm and many others. There are certainly, I'll come. There are very beautiful varieties in Tamil Nadu called Kudra Samba, Maapalai Samba. This, they are all given for a specific purpose.
Yes.
And the gene conservation, and we have not mainstreamed them into a practicality. For example, in the Tamil Nadu cyclone which came, only one variety cultivated by one of the persons, a traditional variety, survived the continuous flow or water flow, but still it yielded on par. So there are many good works that's going on in submergence rice, which was worked under NICRO project. So there are many good examples.
Sir, thank you, sir. We'll take your suggestion, and
we'll come sometime.
Yeah, and in fact, last year, or rather this year, we have initiated a special trial for evaluation of specialty rices, including the colored rices. So this will provide an opportunity for some of the land races or improved versions of these land races like Kuriyadichan, Kudrai Samba, Maplai Samba to be mainstream, and then possibly after stringent testing in our national system, along with respective checks, they cannot compete with variety like Swarna or Samba Masuri, but we'll select appropriate checks of similar traditional land races and test their relative performance. And possibly in another 2 or 3 years, you'll find that lot many such specialty rice varieties get released through the national testing system. And my colleague, Dr. L.V. Subbarao, he's playing a key role in getting many of the farmers' varieties registered with PP and FRA. You may be aware that probably rice has the highest number of farmers registered variety, and all application to our breeding team. And we'll certainly take your suggestion.
Have you profiled all your rice genotypes, cultivars for performance under drip irrigation?
Sir, initially we worked with Netafin related drip irrigation. Our results were mixed because we were trying with only one or few genotypes. Now with direct seeded rice picking up and wherein drip irrigation has got a lot of scope. So once again, we are tied up with drain irrigation. And last Rabi, we launched a trial. Results are very encouraging. My colleague, Dr. Mahendra Kumar, who is...
there is a very serious virus disease of rice, black streak virus.
Yes, sir.
Transmitted by Sogetella persifera,
Yes, sir.
hitting Punjab and many others.
Sir, it is because of, it's my understanding, I may be wrong. It's mainly because of a rapidly changing climate, because Punjab and Haryana usually used to witness generally BPH in the initial phases and then WBPH in the later phases. But this time it has been because of persistent rainy weather for a period of more than 10 days or approximately about 10 to 12 days in Punjab and Haryana and also in Uttarakhand. It's probably the insect dynamics has changed, wherein there is a preponderance of white-backed plant hopper in some of those territories. And this disease is not new. There have been some historical records. It's called as Fiji virus disease or rice striped stem virus disease. But based on my discussion with our coordinating partners or cooperating partners, the disease is not more than 2 to 5%.
Yeah, it's not more, luckily.
And fortunately, like say, we got some very good chemicals with excellent active ingredients for management of the insect. So next year, if we don't see a rapid change in rainfall pattern, what we saw this year, probably the disease may appear, but it will be very sporadic, sir.
Thank you.
And we are sending a special team of plant pathologists and entomologists very shortly to go and survey in those areas and then collect data and then present a report, sir. Probably Chitra madam may or somebody may be part of the team.
Sir, there's a question from Dr. Mahendra Kumar, our agronomy head. He would like to know, what is your view on exporting rice? Should we stop or should we continue? Because you mentioned something about it. So his question, sir, Mahendra sir, you can directly ask too.
And Mahendra sir, you can also
unmute, sir. Unmute.
And Mahendra sir can answer Dr. Krishna Kumar's query regarding drip irrigation. He is working on it.
Regarding export of rice,
Sir.
my answer is short term, yes, maybe for another 10 years, but in the long term, you should stop exporting rice. Because, you know, any export or import policies, it takes time to implement. And if at all we export, it should be limited to basmati rice of quality rice. And that too, if it is from Punjab, so extensively grown, see, till we find a crop replacement for rice, exports from Punjab will continue. But we also know the problems associated with rice, stubble burning, climate, and many other things associated with Punjab. So the question is, Punjab has a serious problem with regard to its water table, with regard to many of the other complexities that are coming. If you don't answer these questions and take hard decisions today, for example, free electricity, you cannot afford free electricity anymore to Punjab, and you will spoil entire Punjab in the long run. But you know, these are all popular measures. People will find it very difficult. You saw with MSP. I had a long chat with Ramesh Chandi. MSP is counterproductive, but nobody is willing to listen because it becomes a political tool. So there are issues that have to be politically sensitive.
So we can't hear you, sir. So you're muted.
No, I'm not muted.
I think there was some.
Am I not audible?
Yeah, now
Yes,
you're
sir,
not audible.
you are.
Just hold on.
Yes, sir. You're audible, sir.
So you're audible, sir.
So the tomatoes, coconuts, many others, we should not be. See, we should export high-end products like medicinal, even in medicinal plants, active ingredients and not the foliage. We should export the chemical constituents and not the. So there are many things that are coming. We should not be a developed nation. exports less and less. What does really Japan export in terms of agriculture? So those kinds of things, because we are exporting practically our water. If I move 1,000 tender coconuts from south to north, what is it that I am shifting? I am shifting only water from one end to one end. So these are all questions that will come in the long run, but then it will take time. It will take time.
Mahendra sir, you can also answer sir's query regarding drip irrigation.
Sir, we have already, I think, started from last season, sir. We are in collaboration with Jain Irrigations. We are also having a specific project with breeders to evaluate the varieties which are tolerant to the water stress conditions. Totally all the varieties which are being developed will be tested under water stress conditions so that we can produce rice with 2,000 liters of water, 1 kg of rice with 2,000 liters.
What I meant was like how we screened the UG99 wheat genotypes. All the genotypes of rice, can they be evaluated that a large go for under drip irrigation? The reason is tomorrow rice will be grown only with protective irrigation. The days of flooding are gone.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are slowly working towards that end, sir.
Because International Conference of Millets, we saw one of the papers that I presented was ragi under drip irrigation gives 3 times more yield and better quality.
Yes, yes, sir. We'll take up, sir. Thank you very much.
So if there's
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, it's a nice and then thought-provoking talk, sir, as always. So, sir, thank you for introducing me to Smita Krishnan also. I'm in touch with her, sir. Actually, recently we had a meeting with Natalia also, just to have with Natalia and also with Dr. Smita. We are in the process of developing the ABD index for the insect diversity, sir. We had a preliminary round of meeting where we want to standardize the sampling methods and also the data sets to be generated. So just I thought I'll share this with you, sir. Thank you, sir.
In fact, Sridevi was also coming as a part of when we did for Godavari River.
Yes,
Among
sir.
all the aquatic insects, only gerrids were there. No other insect was there in Godavari. And it was surprising. So many families and only one family was dominating.
Yes, yes, sir.
so we have recorded around 13 aquatic predators in our rice fields, sir.
No. Again, I'm telling numerical diversity and functional diversity. This is what I'm telling. The
Not numerical, sir. I'm talking about the functional diversity.
Yeah.
We have been doing functional diversity for the past decade in rice, sir, actually.
Very good. Very good. See, the thing is, once we understand the functional diversity, I think we are in a better ground with regard to understanding the ecological interactions. In addition to ABD index, I have been telling one of the things that I'm in all our biological control and ECRIP trials, we used to have what is called as the benefit cost ratio. I have never seen a more stupid concept than that, because how will you really evaluate the biological control success in terms of benefit cost ratio? How will you talk pollination in terms of benefit cost ratio? Is it what about the indirect benefits that accrue, which could be 10 times more by the withdrawal of pesticides or many other crops that are pollinated? So in addition to the indices that we are talking, we should slowly move towards a sustainability index.
Yes.
And that sustainability index is a fulcrum which can go a little bit of left or right, but we should understand. We also developed another model when we were working with the Godavari called the insect component, the plant component, the water component, and all other soil component. And through a multi-dimensional graph, we can say which area is actually impacted more, which is really causing a disturbance in the biodiversity and productivity. And those aspects can be addressed. For example, let us say water productivity. If the fluorine or chlorine content or something increases and large fish death is there, we exactly point out what is it that's caused. So there are many aspects that need to be looked into.
So actually this idea was mooted, and recently NBAR, we had a meeting on creating a index like this. We had a meeting so that we can include ecosystem services also in the thing. I think in future, it might be a possibility.
Good.
As one question, sir, what is your suggestion for rice entomology in the context of ecosystem services and agrobiodiversity?
Rice ecosystem has to be fragmented into which ecosystem we are talking. The Northeast rice is different from the rice that is cultivated in Tamil Nadu. The rice that is cultivated in the backyards of backward water or whatever in Kochi, and is very different from what is seen in Punjab. So we have to first identify an ecosystem-based, agro-ecosystem-based rice that we are talking about. Coastal rice, and with regard to irrigated rice and many others. With regard to the rice, I see, for example, let me take the example of Karnataka. There is one Mandya rice ecosystem and a Ballari rice ecosystem. Mandya rice ecosystem is a easygoing rice ecosystem. That means no high input. They are just very happy to cultivate whatever they can cultivate. Whereas in Ballari and Raichur, it is a very heavy fertilizer and pesticide driven ecosystem. Now the question of it is, we have to first identify which are the areas where we are facing problems. And in those problems, prioritize those problems and what aspect of biodiversity can actually address. The, for example, BPH. If there is a lot of BPH, then what is it that we have to do in those particular zones? For example, in other places, it may be something submergence rice, or then you have to identify those genotypes. So it cannot, there is no one, I call it as, it is region specific, bifurcated into different zones and accordingly addressed. So if you name the problem, then accordingly we have to find a solution for that.
Any more questions, please?
Sir, thank you for giving very enlightening talk, sir, and very interesting. Sir, you have been mentioning that pesticides are one of the cause of reducing biodiversity, or to some areas maybe like killing biodiversity. And also now the government has introduced organic or natural farming. And sir, do you support use of pesticides? You promote organic farming, which the Sri Lankan government has promoted and also now reaping the results. One of the causes, of course, for the collapse of Sri Lankan finance or whatever it is. Sir, what is your opinion?
I support pesticides in agriculture. There is no second opinion. Another decades to come, we have to depend on pesticides. But the problem with pesticides usage is the problem. We are, most of the time, it is the wrong pesticide, it is the wrong dosages, it's the wrong type of spray, wrong application, and with no cause for any of the other concerns. As a result, what is happening is, what should be a very potent weapon that we have spoiled by absolutely unscientific, and the policies are also absolutely, there is, you say something, the 90% of the pesticides that we are using, they do crop-wise label claim, which makes no meaning. Now they are changing a bit. And what kind of pesticides, as I see from the farmers field, from the interaction, even among the scientist group, many a times, whenever there is a problem, the kind of suggestions that come is absolutely mind-boggling. That means neither they are aware of the problem, nor they are aware of the solution, even among scientists. Leave apart others. So if that is the case, this kind of an unscientific application of pesticides, it's a serious effort has to go with regard to this thing is 50 to 70% of the pesticides that we are applying is actually unwanted.
Now that we are getting very specific pesticides, sir, and also very less dose and are safe to natural enemies, still you feel
Yeah,
like
there is no pesticide which is safe to natural enemy. This so-called green, they are so expensive. They are so expensive. One, or unaffordable. Second one is the availability and the science behind pesticide is never a question. Imidacloprid or Confidor group of chemicals were one of the most potent. And how did we misuse them? So the same way you begin to misuse those kind of chemicals, it's only a matter of then we don't have any chemicals for thrips. We don't have any chemicals for whiteflies. We don't have any chemicals for mealybugs. We don't have good chemicals for nematodes. So the question is, where we really need, we don't have an answer. I would say that to a great extent, we can manage with, I would say, neem soap, Pongamia soap, BT, NPV, or if all other options let us explore. In certain cases, for example, in protected cultivation, where export-oriented commodities, in fact, I am for pesticide as long as we ensure that what we market is residue-free product.
Sir, one more question. Now that there is a lot of encouraged support for use of drones for spray of pesticides, and very largely they are used in Andhra Pradesh also. What is your feeling that, sir, whether the spray of by drones will affect agrobiodiversity?
It should not in any way different than what traditionally we spray, but it is only data is how we document the data and how we are going to effectively do it. For example, one advantage of drone is it can be operated at a very safe periods when many of their activities are not there. Okay, so there are aspects which the drones gives a tremendous advantage. Drone technology is good. It is very, very spot applications can be made. For example, in coconut and many other coconut and tall trees, you can just make a spot application. I am also for biotechnology, where biotechnological interventions can make a great deal of difference if scientifically applied. So science should be viewed as a promoter of the sustainable development, and not that is something. If everything were to be natural, then we should not go for polio drops.
So one of the participants is asking whether the PDF version of your slides can be shared.
Oh yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It's also live streamed on YouTube, so they can log in at any time and view it, sir.
Oh yes, no problem. No
Any more questions from the participants, please? So if there are no questions, can we go for wrapping up, sir? Sundaram, sir?
Thank you. Please, thank you very much. I
1
appreciate.
minute, sir. Formal
And I'm
vote of
honored.
thanks.
I'm
Formal
honored
vote
by-
of thanks, sir. Formal vote of thanks. It's my proud privilege to propose a formal vote of thanks on behalf of the Director IIRR and on my personal behalf. I earnestly thank you for readily accepting our invitation with a short notice, sir, to share your views on this most enlightening topic. It was like a whirlwind, sir. You have taken us through 1 hour. We just didn't know how the time has passed. You have taken us through agrobiodiversity, ecosystem services, sustainable agriculture. I think all the dignitaries, I thank all the dignitaries for sparing their valuable time. There were many participants from various sister institutes of ICAR and our ECRIP cooperators also, sir, who are online. And I thank all of them for this, for participation. And you have also talked about the importance of productivity associated with sustainability, the importance of ABI, impact of natural calamities on biodiversity, exploitation of underutilized germplasm and crops and their conservation, conservation of the wild progenitors. What more? You have touched all facets of biodiversity and ecosystem services, sir. Thank you for the enlightening talk, sir. And
Thank you.
thank all my seminar team for participation and helping me with this organization, and the staff of AKMU IIRR for arranging this seminar, sir. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sundaram Garu,
Sir,
Kumari, Jhansi.
sir, we would like to invite you.
Sir,
Andarku namaskaram.
thank you, sir.
thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Sir, we would like to invite you officially and unofficially to our
Thank you.
institute.
Thank
to
you,
come
Arun.
and, have a look at our research facilities and then advise us and guide us with regard to our projects.
Sure, sure. Really, anytime.
Most welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Yeah, we can close the meeting, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Photo नहीं लेना।